there, welcome to the show. Today I'm going to talk about The Driver, which comes in this snazzy... This is from Amazon France. I'll open up the snazzy steelbook. You can get it in normal release from Steel Canal, but the steelbook is really nice. And this is for 4K edition. The 4K edition has been remastered very nicely as well. So I would definitely recommend getting the 4K for The Driver if you're interested in Driver, because it is a good little B movie from the 70s that wasn't really caught up, it wasn't really caught in the mainstream. This is the early Walter Hill period where he's making stuff like Hard Times, The Warriors. He was trying to get some attention. So in these early films, he's very lean as a director. He was trying to show that he could tell a story simply and get to the point. Now, Walter Hill, as he went on in his career, started to become a director who had films that were a bit longer and could be a bit bloated at times. He did something I really like Streets of Fire or Geronimo. But he also did films that felt like, this doesn't need to be as long as this. So he's a director who is pretty much based on the idea of the Howard Hawks and the John Ford thing of stick to the point, don't be pretentious, tell your story and get out. But like any director, sometimes he doesn't listen to his own advice and can meander a little bit. That became a problem in his career, as it would make some films, especially as you get older, try to do more mature subjects, and you'd find that his genre interests meant that sometimes he didn't have enough drive. So he'd be jumping to a kind of character-based idea, and sometimes he didn't have the script for it, is the best way. Because when he directed stuff for Deadwood, we had really good scripts, he was great. But sometimes it's a case of, I think Walter Hill, the writer, sometimes got in the way of Walter Hill, the director. Which happens with a lot of directors who are writer-directors, where they've written their own stuff for years, and they end up not spotting their own weaknesses. But this is early Walter Hill. This is when he was really cooking. He was delivering some really good films, and he was sticking to his mantra of keeping it to the point. And The Driver's a great example of this. The Driver's about it's set in a nameless city. We have a character played by Ryan O'Neal who's basically named The Driver in our logic. We don't get his name. He does drive getaways for criminals. He's got a code. You do not mess with his code. You do not try and threaten him for anything. If he does not want to do business with you, he will not. If he thinks you're an amateur who's going to get him arrested, he will not do business with you. It's a romantic conceit. Basically, it's come from Jean-Pierre Melville with Samurai and things like that, which is kind of taking the kind of the silent hero character to the pared down essentials. This has always been a mainstay in film, is just a male character who's very quiet and sticks to himself. He's got his own set of codes. You see it in a lot of gangster films. You see it in a lot of films about the law enforcement of the guys chasing down the criminals. Have got their code. Are going to keep going after them. It is a cliche that sometimes it's based on fact. Some people who are either criminals or cops are obsessive, but it's that thing is it depends what you do with it. And in this case, in Walter Hill in the 70s, he liked the essential genre constraints and keep it simple. So he'd hire good actors to basically flesh out what he'd written. So he had Ryan O'Neal to flesh out The Driver. Ryan O'Neal was at his peak at this point. He'd done Barry Lyndon. He'd done What's Up, Doc. He'd done Love Story. He'd done a bunch of films that made a lot of money. So he was, at this point, a bankable actor. And Walter Hill managed to get his first few films made with bankable actors. His first film, Hard Times, played James Coburn and Charles Bronson. And this time he had Bruce Dern and Ryan O'Neal and Isabella Adjani. So early on, while he was getting his bona fides, he'd work with actors who are well known, better known than him. He was coming in as a guy who's known as a good writer. Hence him writing the scripts throughout his career. So he was viewed as a guy at this point who was advancing from being viewed as a writer to being a director. And he still tried to build up his bona fides, so he had to be as lean as possible. So even though his first two films weren't massive successes, they showed skill, and that was in a genre that people thought was saleable, which is the action movie. So he was always going to get something. He's always going to get some jobs if he showed skill here. And The Driver is one of those films that shows a lot of skill, both in the acting and in the directing and in the action. So there was a lot to go with. But he definitely was smart enough to hire people who could understand the script and not need a lot of direction. So Bruce Dern plays a detective who's kind of corrupt, but in a way that he wants to catch the guy. He's not corrupt for making money for himself. He's in the hunt. He wants the guy caught. He wants to catch the driver because this guy's allowing a lot of bank robbers to get away with it when normally they get caught. So if he gets rid of if he gets the driver, it makes it a lot easier for him to catch all these criminals. And he knows who the criminals are, and he basically hunts down the bank robbers to try and get closer to the driver. Essentially, it's his tactic to understand who would do the robbery and work from there to find out who the driver is. So therefore, if he catches the driver and gets him put away, catching bank robbers is going to be a lot easier for the police. So he's a logical reason for doing what he does, but he loves being a total dick to people. He gets off on, being nasty to the criminals and putting them down and make them know their place, and he gets off on that, and he's just a horrible person. And he's even though he's inside the law, you really hate him in a way that Bruce Dern can really make you hate a character if he puts his mind to it. So he's a blast throughout it. And the fact is, because Ryan was playing this character pretty much down the line underplayed, it allows Dern to really go off and be a villain. And then the kind of mix of these two actors work really well, because it's just like you've got this malicious cop versus this guy who's a criminal, but he's not. He's only doing the getaway driving. He does have still have his code. He will not kill people. He's got a certain thing, but even though he is a criminal. So, they set up this kind of skewed logic of the film, and into this comes this professional gambler played by Isabella Genie, who gets caught up with the driver, who gets targeted by the detective, and it becomes all three of them orbiting around each other and interacting with each other, and you get to learn the codes from how they interact with each other. So even though it's really a chase movie and a pared down existential thriller, there is still enough interactions that you get the point of every character. Which was the problem about how later on, where he'd over-explain this stuff in a way that was like, I don't need to have these scenes. We got the point. And sometimes it was like, it was almost either giving into his own pretentiousness or giving into the actors and giving them more stuff to do when all it did was dissipate the energy of what was needed in this story. So it became this thing of a director who, from my opinion, is a director I really liked, who became a bit self-indulgent. But in these earlier films, he's not. These early films, he's terrific. And The Driver has great chase scenes. I mean, if you've seen the Lyndon Refn film Drive, it's highly influenced by The Driver, and as the director will openly admit it, it became a film that a lot of directors who were doing car chases would look at and see, because Walter Hill knew he didn't know enough, so he hired really good people who understood cars, understood what cars could do, and he would listen to them, and then he'd find ways to shoot the scenes and use their expertise to find ways to shoot the cars so that they'd always have high impact. Like he was interested in comics when he was younger, so he used that logic of what was the best angle to actually make sure the car chases had a logic and also had a visual impact. So it's all very well planned out. So he planned the action out as much as he planned the rest of the stuff. Again, he had really good actors who could add a lot, and he would give them space to add things to the parts or to pare down the parts. to the right level, and then he could direct them to what was needed. Because Walter Hill doesn't like to talk about motivation with his actors. He's like, one of the directors, like, that's why I hired you. And I expect you to have read the script, understood the script, and have discussions of the script, and then you can take responsibility for your character. That's the kind of director he is. And that works really well here because he's hired some great actors. So the film just delivers. It's just wonderful. There's there are some twists in it. And there is some nastiness as the plot winds up and more people get involved in the double crosses. But it's always inventive. It's always interesting. It's not his best film. It's not the pared down genius of The Warriors, which would follow this up with. It's still like a director in the making. There's still a bit of clunkiness here or there, but it's definitely him on his way. And it is a joyful film to watch, just for pure sort of spectacle, just the pure craftsmanship of this film and how pared down it is. It's not quite Melville though. If you're looking for Melville-ish films, look for Melville himself. But it's a good American version of that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this encouraged you to go and watch The Driver. It's a wonderful little film. So I'll see you all later. That's me for now. Right, bye.